Hey folks, I temporarily misplaced my glasses, so you're going to have to bear with me here, but I wanted to do a new book review, and the book is called Gender Inclusive, and sorry about the glare, but it's by Adam Jones, and Adam Jones is a associate professor of political science from a university in British Columbia. And Adam Jones specializes in genocide studies. He looks at genocides or just atrocities committed by different demographics around the globe. And he also talks about the exclusion of male victimization in feminist scholarship. So this book is a collection of essays about men, feminism, and violence and international relations. And it's an excellent resource, and I do recommend it right off the bat. Now, Adam Jones has also faced a lot of challenges in trying to get his works published, because whenever he would try to get his works into different journals, feminist scholars that were part of the peer review process would unanimously reject his submissions because of his tendency to, he often criticizes feminism's attempts to either marginalize or exclude the experiences of men. This is not to say that he describes himself as anti-feminist, but that's what the those in the peer review process have accused him of being. He has ended up getting his work submitted, though, and he has won awards for them. But when I look through here, he cites many wonderful. I probably shouldn't use the word wonderful, because this book is actually really hard to read. It talks about actually some ghastly's a better word, some ghastly examples of male victimization, and he does include victimization of women as well. So this is it is in essence comprehensive and even-handed in its approach, but his inclusion of his criticism of how we tend to only focus on female victimization and men as perpetrators, it's through that criticism that he ended up facing the challenges that he did in submitting his work. So I could not possibly go through all of the individual details in this book without making this video incredibly long. But I will go ahead and give you some key statistics and some various criticisms he's offered to news outlets and through cultural, whatever is considered salient in culture, to give you an idea about the things that this guy is pointing out. And those high points should set should set some interesting tones for discussion in the future. And I wanted to give a shout out to the men's rights groups that are popping up all over Canada. If any of you happen to be, if a new organization or an existing organization happens to be based near the University of British Columbia, Okanagan, that would be where he's currently employed, unless there was a recent change for him. And in the event that he's touring to other universities to give speeches, keep an eye out for him. He's probably a really good guy to get in contact with. Now, sorry if I butchered the pronunciation of the school, by the way. It's very likely that I did. I'm American, and but anyway. So, I guess I'll go ahead and start digging through here and picking out some key studies. And through these studies, I think you'll learn some pretty interesting, if not outright surprising facts. Or maybe not surprising facts, depending on how experienced you are in men's rights activism. Jones had a moment of serendipity. During the War of Kosovo, between March and June 1999, he took an opportunity to analyze how the Western media portrayed the conflict. So what he ended up doing was take a broad sample of media coverage, and these are the sources that he was looking at. He had some internet news groups and electronic newspapers and broadcasters. The internet news groups were all came from clary.news.conflict.misc, clary.news.crime.war, clary.news.refugees, clary.news.photos, and clary.world.organizations.misc. As for the broadcasters, he looks at the Globe and Mail, the National Post, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Guardian, the Observer, the Guardian/the Observer, the Christian Science Monitor, and BBC News Online. And what he ended up doing was he was looking at all of these sources and the way that they were covering the Kosovo War, and he wanted to see how the gender variable in genocide and in international atrocities or conflict was handled by these different broadcasters. Jones identified 3 tactics employed by Western media outlets to, in some way, marginalize or exclude the male experience, but include the woman's experience. And the 3 tactics are incidentalizing, displacement, and simple exclusion. Now, on the subject of incidentalization, if you've ever worked in graphic design or some other discipline that involves visual media, journalism included, you might know that there, in a composition or piece, there's something that has the dominant element and that catches the reader's attention, such as the headline, or the largest element, or the one with a contrasting color, something like that. And other elements that are not dominant obviously don't catch as much attention. And incidentalization is when it comes to male victimization, is to take male victimization and make it the non-dominant element in whatever piece that's relevant. And this is, according to Jones, a problem when gender is a very large variable in determining the experience of a victim in a tragedy or genocide or some sort of other blatant violation of humanity. The next tactic that Jones talks about again is displacement, and displacement I think is best defined by Jones himself, so I'm going to quote this. Quote, "Here, the male is defined by some trait or label other than gender, even when gender obviously or apparently is decisive in shaping the experience or predicament being described," unquote. And he goes ahead and cites a passage, and I'm going to go ahead and read you this passage that he quotes. Quote, "Bodies of dead prisoners," Jones's emphasis, prisoners, "were shown to reporters lying around the prison courtyard Saturday, May 22nd, and on Monday, May 24th. Another group of corpses," again, Jones' emphasis, corpses, "inside a foyer entrance to a cell block. Despite the presence of 1,000 mostly ethnic Albanian prisoners," again, Jones's emphasis, and I'm going to go ahead and break out of this right now. Notice that these phrases, prisoners, corpses, ethnic Albanian prisoners, bodies of prisoners, bodies, new group of dead, 25 bodies, corpses, all of these things are actually describing men. And if you've ever watched Man-Woman Myth, he talks about this as well, such as a mine shaft collapsing. You know the victims are male. They're men. It's all men. And if not all men, almost 100% men. And even though there's that clear gender dimension, reporters would not describe them as men. But if women were the victims, then all of a sudden they're described as women. The gender variable is suddenly included. And the last marginalization strategy is exclusion. So we're talking about flat out not talking about the male victimization whatsoever. And so let me go ahead and move to another example here. Quote Jones, "The trend has been persistently evident in media coverage of the Bosnian War, as an October 1999 report makes plain." And again, Jones is adding his own emphasis throughout the passage he's about to quote here. So I'm going to break my quote with Jones and go into the quote for the report. And whenever there's an emphasis, I'm going to mention it. Quote, "Bosnian forensic teams have exhumed 251 bodies, mainly of Muslim civilians," emphasis Jones, "and the Serb run half of Bosnia in the last 2 weeks. The," emphasis Jones, "bodies, victims, end emphasis, of the 1992 to 95 Bosnian War were exhumed from more than 14 mass graves, each containing up to 15 corpses as well as individual graves. The majority," emphasis Jones, "including 12 women and 5 children," end emphasis, "were executed by Bosnian Serb forces who had captured these regions at the beginning of the war. Some 3,000 people," emphasis Jones, "mainly Muslims," emphasis again, "were still missing in northwestern Bosnia." So that's the end of the quote of that passage. So here's what Jones has to say about it. Quote, 93% adult male casualties. But the fact passes unmentioned in the rush to draw attention to the small minority of worthy victims, that is, the 12 women and 5 children. So that's exclusion. So this was a brief glimpse into how the Western media covers these travesties and the death of just basically truckloads of people. And when we look at this coverage and we look at the way that the gender variable is handled, it brings into question the sensationalist and, frankly, the lack of objectivity in Western journalism. To quote Jones, quote, "A sense of the disparity in the discourse of gender is conveyed by an internet search using the Google search engine, which allows the researcher to search for specific strings of words within quotation marks, for example, gender and development, as opposed to gender and development without quotes." So, for those of you who, unquote for a second, so for those of you who are not familiar with any advanced search in Google whatsoever, if you, this isn't actually that advanced, but when you quote your search query in Google, it will search for those exact words as they appear in search results, where if you do not use quotes at all, it'll look at the individual keywords and use essentially a different algorithm to compute results to send back to you. Now, quote Adam Jones again. "This ensures that the results include all the words, including common words like and, that are normally not included." So consider these search results. Now in this table, there's probably too much glare here, so yeah, never mind there. Can't really use the camera. But he uses a bunch of different query strings, and what he does is he reports the number of hits that Google returns for each of these quotes. And since they're quoted, that means people have had to have typed them somewhere for them to appear in the search results. Quote gender and development, 505,000 hits. Women in development, 189,000 hits. Men in development, 734 hits. Women in the developing world, 44,600 hits. Men in the developing world, 453 hits. Women in international development, 12,700 hits. Men in international development, 3 hits. Third world women, 109,000 hits. Third world men, 339 hits. Women in poverty, 72,100 hits. Men in poverty, 175. And it keeps going in this fashion. The gap is just massive. Now, of course, these numbers may have changed since the time this table was compiled. But at the time this was compiled, Jones says that there's when it came to the women in international development example, it's generating over 4,000 times as many hits. So we're talking about a real gap in salience. Now, Jones did admit elsewhere in this book that it is oftentimes that even if you're talking about something in a fair and unisex manner, it is possible for a topic such as women to gain salience and then drop in salience again, and then men would gain salience and what have you. But Jones was saying that this might not actually be so much the case because we're looking at a blatant focus on women to the exclusion of men. Now, I'll go ahead and confess right off the bat that I'm leaving out a lot of details, and frankly, I could not cover this entire book in one video. But again, the book is called Gender Inclusive by Adam Jones, and this book is excellent. Please buy it. And it's loaded with references, loaded with data, and loaded with just coverage that you would not hear from a media that is gynocentric, just at all. You would not hear this stuff. And if you pick up this book, try to definitely tell your friends about it, try to get it spread, because this is the kind of stuff that you would want to hear about if you were wanting the whole picture. So if you wanted to hear about feminist scholarship and genocide, you might actually get some benefit from it so long as the coverage of women alone was objective, but because it's gynocentric, you don't want to leave it at just that. You want to include this book. And I think that through the experiences that Adam Jones has gone through in the peer review process, I think this should also serve as a reminder that feminist scholarship serves as a horizontally integrated ideological force. And from what I've seen here, there was a very brief mention, and I don't remember where it is, but social sciences and political science and the way that this research is done by feminist scholars suggests that the experiences have to start, this discipline has to start from women's standpoint, women's experiences, which suggests a very strong presence of feminist standpoint theory, which again is the notion that, as I just said, social science and social discipline should start from the standpoint of women, which is textbook gynocentrism. So again, pick up the book. I want you to read through it. In many places it's very hard to read. You have to read about some brutal shit that happened to both men and women. It's hard to imagine, hard to digest, but read it anyway. It's a scholarly resource. It's fairly easy to get through, considering, and you will thank yourself for having gone through and assimilated that information. Thanks very much for watching. Victor Zen out.